Hey, man, I've got a great conversation with my friend Timothy Wenger coming up here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to tell you guys about our Facebook group. It's called the Wolf and Iron Community. And guys, if you're not a part of this thing, you're missing out. I think every guy needs other men in his life that he can ask questions to, that he can get to know, that he can be challenged by. And we've got a growing community, and you guys can be a part of this. Head over to wolfandiron.com/the group. Do that right now. And it'll take you over to our Facebook group page. There are a few questions to answer there to be a part of the group. We're serious about keeping the quality of the men in this group high. And one of the ways that we're doing that is that you guys answer the questions. And based on those questions, we let you in or we don't. We want to make sure that you're a man that's serious about growing as a man. And that means that the guys that you're connecting with on the group are also serious about growing themselves. There's a lot of great conversations going on over there. Once again, wolfandiron.com/the group. And I wanted to give you guys an update on something else that I talked about last year, and that is our Ask a Man episodes. Now, this kind of went by the wayside a little bit because, well, I screwed up the first episode. My friend Brandon and I came in, we recorded a couple, but the very first one that we did, I totally hosed it up with the editing and stuff like that. So the holidays went by and we had to get back together again and redo that one and just finish that up. But we've got a couple of episodes ready to go. And so be on the lookout for the Ask a Man series of podcast episodes. And here's what I'm looking for, guys. I want your feedback on these things because I like having a conversation with my pal. I think these things are really beneficial, but I also want to know if you guys are getting something from it or not. So if you want to hear more of it, you got to let me know. And a great place to do that actually is at the Wolf and Iron community. So go head over there, wolfandiron.com/the group. Okay, on with this episode.
Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents. Welcome back to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm your host, Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and I'm glad you're here. Well, my guest today is my pal, Timothy Wenger. And he has a really cool project that he set up years ago that has really just made a big impact on him. And I think it helps us get some insight into how society views masculinity. And this is a real fluid conversation. I didn't set this up as a, very structured sort of ask, certain questions, anything along those lines like I typically do with the people that I'm interviewing. So this has a really good flow to it. But he's got a really cool project. It's called themaneffect.com. And he essentially went out and began asking people one question. What does it mean to you to be a man? How would you put that in one word? And he's doing this with people on the street. He's doing this with people that he doesn't really know that well. And he's taking their picture. So as a photographer, this has been a great way for him to get out and really hone that craft as well. But this conversation is all about what are the responses that people have, but it's also about getting out of your comfort zone and pursuing that thing that you feel called to do, even though you don't necessarily know where it's going to take you. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this one. So without further ado, here's my pal, Timothy Wenger. Mr. Timothy Wenger, thank you for joining me on the Wolf and Iron podcast.
Thanks for having me. Oh my gosh.
Did I get your last name right? Is it Wenger or Winger? How do I say that?
Yeah, Wenger. You got it right the first time.
All right. So I know we've talked a couple of times. You and I, you reached out to me months ago. I think you're getting ready to go on a trip out of the States. And we were just kind of talking back and forth about some of the things that you're doing with the Man Effect and what I'm doing with Wolf and Iron and how those things kind of line up and how they're different. And since I've gotten to know you over those last couple of months, we've talked again. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really appreciate about what you do in any of the forums or any of the Facebook groups that I see you in, you always ask really good questions. And so I think you're really in your niche in terms of the Man Effect and a lot of the things that are going on over there, asking people questions. So thanks for just bringing the good questions to the guys wherever you happen to be. They're always thought provoking. They always get a lot of really good response, and so I think it's a rare quality. So thanks for doing that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. So for the guys who aren't familiar with you, maybe not be familiar with the Man Effect and what's kind of going on there, we're going to kind of talk about a couple of different things. This is going to be more of a fluid conversation because we do know each other a bit. But I do want guys to know a little bit about you and kind of how you guys started with what you've been doing as a photographer involving men. Just tell us about this whole project and a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I started the Man Effect back in 2014. I had been on my own personal journey of trying to find what it meant to be a man, and, I wasn't finding any good answers. No one could answer my questions. And so one day, being that I'm a photographer, I was watching some videos on that, and I was watching an interview between Chase Jarvis. He's the guy who started a website called Creative Live, and then I can't remember the guy's name, but he's the individual who, the photographer who started Humans of New York, which is just this massive. I love it. I was watching them talk, and I was just like, man, you know what? I'm no different than these guys. Like, they're humans, I'm human, and I need something to like really focus my energy on. I was like, I'm going to start a project. And so I combined my desire to grow in photography and start a project with my desire for masculinity. And I was like, man, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to establish some sort of project? And then I don't even honestly know where this question came from, but this is what started it all, which was, if you were to describe what it means to be a man in one word, what would it be and why? And the second that popped into my head, I was like, man, I'm going to interview people. I'm just going to ask a ton of people this and get all their different inputs. And that was the beginning. And I really, really have enjoyed the journey since then.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. And I'll tell you what I like about this. And I think it's another rare quality. A lot of guys need more of this, is that you kind of figured out, like, you sort of did a little bit of soul searching to figure out what it is that you wanted to get from this thing, right? And you wanted to combine your values and your passions and your talents together. Your passion for photography, but also these questions that you have about what it means to be a man. And you didn't just, according to your story and how you didn't just pick it apart and ho-hum over it for, 3 or 4 years and go, well, maybe it was a good idea, but, who would I really talk to? A lot of guys really, they just stop themselves from really pursuing anything and just see what'll come of it, because they're so worried about, the negative outcome that's going to happen. What if you go on the street and you ask questions and nobody wants to talk to you? What if people think you're some kind of salesman? What if, and they just what if themselves out of any kind of, cool thing. And I think that's really neat about what you've done, is that you didn't do that. You just kind of went after it. And I think that's great.
What's amazing to me is actually just taking action and pursuing it, has changed my life, literally. And it's literally taken a life of its own and taught me more than I ever thought I would ever learn from just taking photos of people and writing a blog, Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, Timothy, that right there is a great sign of being a man. And I think, we could talk all day about what it means to be a man. Obviously, if the guys who are listening to this, if they go out to themaneffect.com, they can go on just the front page there. You've got a bunch of pictures of people and with different answers about what they think it means to be a man in one word. But obviously, this is a broad topic, and we can, this is not something that we could just discuss it at one time and have it all nailed down. But I think that what you're talking about there, that decisiveness, that action, the just let's see what life has for me kind of attitude, I think is very manly. So good on you. I want to. So you got this one question that you're asking everybody. If you could say in one word what it means to be a man, that's going out there. How do people respond to that? So when you're out there and you're asking this to, I'm looking at your website. You've got people who look like they're homeless. You've got people from different countries. You've got people of all different ethnicities and things like that. How do people respond to this kind of thing? And do you find that it was an easy thing to start, like easier than you thought, or was it harder than you thought?
I was really surprised initially by people's responses. I was really, really on the front end It was always fun for me to ask someone this question on the street and then see them like stop and take a minute and be like, wow, like that's a good question. Like, you ask a good question when someone like doesn't answer right away.
Yeah, right,
like it takes them a little while. And there's people who would just write me off and say something funny, and I would just kind of move on because I was actually looking for authentic responses.
Right.
But for the most part, everyone really wanted to talk about the topic. Of masculinity, and most people were instantly drawn to father figures in their lives, whether it's their mom, because single moms are father figures, grandpas, dads, uncles. It was amazing how quick they instantly went to those father figures.
Yeah.
Like, I love seeing that, and the value for those people in their lives. It was really fun.
I'll tell you another reason I bet that it takes people a moment to think about it is because, we live in a society today that is told a lot of things, right? We go on the internet, we're told what to think in terms of, we're usually asking a question of our own to something, right? To Google or whatever, and we're told, or we're just hearing people's opinions all day long. Usually we don't get asked our own opinion. We don't really get take time to think, for someone to just catch us and say, what do you think? I care about what your thoughts are on this thing. And I think it's great because it really does get us kind of going.
I have this one really cool story.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was down, so when I started this project, I lived in Kansas City, Missouri. And so I was down in it's called like the River Market area where they have their farmers market and a bunch of restaurants and stuff. And I saw this older gentleman sitting on a flower display, like bench thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell if he was homeless or if he was like a cook, like this dude was greasy, but anyway, he was on the street, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I go up to him and I'm like, hey man, like my name's Tim and I'm doing this photography project. I was wondering, do you have a moment? He's like, yeah, sure. What's up? And so I'm like, well, I'm asking everyone the same question, which is, if you were to describe what it means to be a man in one word, what would it be and why? He's like, oh, okay. Give me a second. So he just kind of like goes into his like brain, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, to make this less awkward, I'm going to act like I'm on my phone. So I'm just standing there like fidgeting with my phone. And after a couple of minutes, I look up, and this guy he has tears running down his face.
Wow.
And I'm like, are you okay? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't answer your question. And I was like, oh, that's okay. I mean, what's going on? He's like, I can't answer your question. I'm not a man. He's like, I've lost my wife and my kids to the bottle. He's like, I'm not a man. And I was like, so impacted. To this random guy decided to actually engage with his heart in that moment on the street with a random dude. And like, it just really, really struck me.
Yeah.
I won't forget that.
Man.
So.
Man, that's like, it's such a, it's the real kind of interaction that we don't see much of, right? And you definitely hit it. If you're asking another man what it means to be a man and he's failed in that area, yeah, man. I mean, it goes right to our very being of our, what's our purpose here? What are we here for? If I can't be a man, then what's the, what am I kind of thing, right? And I think to look in the mirror and say we failed as a man, I think is the greatest. It's the greatest sort of sense of shame that we can have as men, because it defines us as what we're supposed to be, right? I mean, I look at these answers that people are giving on your website: it's loving, true, honest, assertive, integrity, right, supportive, and the list just goes on. And these things really do define. In a lot of ways, they define what it means to be a good person, but there are particular ways that a man acts these things out, and especially when he has a family, right? He wants to lead in these areas. He wants to set the example in these areas. And if we fail to do that, man, you talk about serious guilt, and not that it can't be overcome, but I think that, man, it's a big impact. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thanks for sharing that story. So thinking, as you kind of look at these things as on the whole, right, you're getting a lot of questions, a lot of answers from people. and there's more that's probably being said in the conversations than in just the one word that they choose. What's your kind of take on how society is kind of viewing manhood today? Like, is it still something that people relate to? And I think it is, obviously. We're having this conversation, but or is it something that people just think, well, that doesn't really exist. You're just, where does society kind of see manhood, I guess, or what are some of the ways that they view men, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I don't know if people would overtly say this, and it might be a strong assumption on my part, but I feel like a lot of people have just had bad experiences with masculine figures in their lives.
Yep.
And they really, really want a good experience. And so I found a lot of people to be tender and to be craving that masculine figure, but had no examples of that in their lives. And so they were just trying to figure out some sort of example to answer the question with in their life. And so even though I feel like there's a lot of negative press for men today, like I think it's just coming from a void of people actually really wanting more healthy, we'll use that terminology, healthy masculinity.
Right. Do you ever have anybody have like negative responses? I know you've had some like jokers and stuff like that, but anyone who just says like, a man hits or a man hates or a man, whatever from their experiences.
I honestly expected that more than I have gotten. I only had one lady. She was very bitter. She's like, I would say chauvinist. And then she kind of just like stampeded off.
Yeah.
And she didn't even want to take time to take the photo. I was like, hey, if that's your answer, like, that's great. Like, let's document it. And she just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I haven't had one negative person allow me to document their answer. So.
See, I think that's really telling. We did back when I had a regular job, we did a team exercise. And this is a hint for you guys. If you ever do this team exercise, I think there was like $500 bonus or something on the table for this. None of us won this thing, by the way. So if you guys hear this and you're like, oh, we're getting ready to do this, just keep this in mind. So if you guys, if a consultant comes in to give a team exercise to you guys, this is the trick. And the exercise was to basically just break up into teams and write down words that have, I'm trying to think about the right word here. Not action words, emotions. Write down emotion words, right? And, and every team, you got a certain amount of time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes or something like that. And you're just naming off word after word after word. There's some kind of emotion. And what the exercise was that it basically tallied up all of the words for that team and said which ones were positive words and which ones were negative words. And every team across the board had probably, 80% negative words that we just came up with randomly, anger, hate, mad, frustrated, right? And very few positive words. And so what they were kind of saying is that the way we sort of typically define the way we look at the world is typically through something of a negative lens. These things come more easily. And I think it's really telling because with your project, and by the way, let me back up. The way to win this thing is you come up with more positive words, right? So if your team happened to have more positive words than negative words, then you won like some money or something like that. But nobody won. And I don't think anybody ever wins this thing. But it's if that's the case, if that's the mindset of most people, is to have more of a negative kind of view of things. And also we live in a society that's, by and large has been spinning a lot of negative things towards masculinity and what it means to be a man. And like you said, people have even had a lot of negative experiences with men. The fact that we have so many people still defining masculinity or manhood as in a positive manner, it's almost like they're saying, even if my experience with men has been negative, I know what a man is supposed to be. Yeah. And I know the kind of man that the world needs, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to call somebody out to be a man, I'm going to call them to something higher and something greater than the experiences that I've had.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And even if they don't have a direct positive experience, they read books or have podcasts or watch YouTube videos and find these positive figures that they desire. And so even from that point, like our human desire for this what I would call an emotional water. Like they find a place to drink for, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like there's this innate need within humanity to feel that safety, that respect, that all those things for this figure in their life.
Yeah.
And I find it so fascinating.
Yep, absolutely agree. And, you know, and that's, you know, to counter the message that we're constantly getting, the negative message about really just about people in general all day long that we hear from the news or media, if you're in touch with that kind of stuff. In order to counter that, I mean, this is an example of, no, people are actually, they want the positive. They want, you know, people to be better. They want people to be more honest, more loving, more true, and things like that. And especially they look for men to kind of lead, to have those characteristics, right? It would be interesting to do the woman effect kind of thing, right? And see what kind of characteristics stand out, right? Would we get basically the same amount of words? Like, you know, would it still be honest, loving, assertive, brave, courageous, you know, whatever the words that are used to define masculinity or manhood? Would it be the same for women? I don't know. I don't know if that's something you've thought about. I mean, obviously that's probably not your passion, but I just think it would be an interesting exercise to just see how people define women, right, versus men, and what words stand out between one sex or the other.
Yeah. I mean, right, almost within the first year of me starting this project, I couldn't tell you how many people told me I should do the other side. And I just looked at them and I'm like, I don't have the energy or the desire. My opinion is that even though I can't cover that side of the journalistic realm, in my opinion, like I still think what I'm doing causes people to question that side as well. Because it's like instantly your mind's like, well, what does it mean to be a woman too? Like, how do I define that mother, that nurturing nature?
Yeah.
So people are already asking those questions, and I honestly think a lot of the attributes of being a good human being that people are highlighting in my project do apply to women as well.
Yep.
It's just my target market's men, and that I'm a man, so I'm just like, that's just my bent.
Yep. Same here. I mean, we get a lot of this. I have women email me and say, hey, I really appreciated your article on thus and so, and that it really spoke to me. And I say, that's great. That's awesome. You know, I want it to appeal to everybody. If possible, it's just my voice and my mission is towards the hearts of men. But I think that there are going to be things, right, that inspire on both sides. And here's what I found too, is that, you know, manliness, masculinity is an inspirational thing for both sexes. You know, woman
absolutely.
Being a woman is an inspirational thing for both sexes. We're drawn to it for different reasons, I believe. You know, a man is drawn to a woman's femininity for certain kinds of reasons. You know, to have that as part of his life and but not necessarily to take that on as himself. I think a woman is drawn to masculinity in the same way. She wants to have that as part of her life, but she doesn't necessarily want to take that on herself in the fullest sense. But I do think that we're both inspired by both examples of good masculinity, good femininity, because really we're living out virtues, but just in our own kind of masculine or feminine kind of way. I want to take a step back for a second, because I'm just thinking about the process of going out and talking to strangers. And I think we could actually learn something from you on this, because this in itself is a very bold thing that I wish more guys had the ability to do, or a reason to do. Tell us about what that process looks like. Maybe give us like some of your first experiences of what it was like to just go out with the camera and just talk to strangers. Did it get easier over time? That kind of stuff.
Well, to give a little more context, even before we get to that part, I'm an INFJ. Okay. So I'm more bent towards being an introverted type, but I can come across extroverted, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm more naturally inclined to stay inside and read a book than go out and talk to strangers, just to give a little pre-context. But I knew starting out that I wanted to interview a lot of people. And, I mean, I'm still interviewing people and still growing my project. But early on, what I did is I started with myself first. I took my own portrait, and then I took my dad's, and then I took a bunch of my friends, and then some acquaintances. You know, like I worked myself up to it, and then I kind of exhausted all my resources, and I was like, well, now it's time. And so, like, I would just go out and walk around with all my gear and it was so awkward initially and so emotionally tumultuous. Like, I was like, man, because walking up to people and being like, hey, like, will you be a part of this thing that I'm really passionate about and really vulnerable about? And they would just destroy me and just be like, no, like, look at me like I'm some sort of like shitty person. And I'm just like, you know, like, I'm like, you don't even know me. Like, and then people would be busy or, you know, all this stuff. I mean, it brought up so many of my insecurities. But eventually, like, I would do things like drag my feet so people could hear me coming so I wouldn't scare them. Like all sorts of like little things like that. Eye contact. Yeah, it was really hard initially. But I kept doing it and it did get easier. And just, I learned how to like get a little bit better at my pitch. You know, I wouldn't stumble on my words. I'd be a little more confident. And what was really fun is once I started like getting better at that, like as I met people and interviewed them, I would ask them to give me referrals. I'd be like, yeah, why don't you, is there anyone in your mind that you think I should interview? Okay, like, that's awesome. Can you give me their number or tell them to call me? And I started doing that. So that helped me have a warm lead in some respects. I didn't have to filter through, you know, like 10, 15 people on the street. I was getting someone like pretty easily. So I was just learning kind of how I operated. But for a couple months, I would say for like 6 months, I made myself post 1 photo a day. And so, like, if I didn't have a photo for that day, I would go out driving until I found someone to take a photo of. I remember going to this church in downtown Kansas City and, like, standing in the office for, like, an hour waiting for the pastor or the deacon or whatever, just so I could interview someone. And it wasn't even that great of an interview, to be honest. But I was just, like, it was the fact that I, like, made myself do it, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I loved. But yeah, trips, man. Yeah, I would drag my feet because you don't want to like walk up to someone and not have them know you and startle them.
Yeah, right.
So I would make sound somehow so they could hear me coming. I always tried to be in their line of sight, like that little thing. Had a good relaxed posture. I wasn't tense. Tried to be jovial, low pressure, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I got rejected quite a bit too. People just kind of like look at me like, what the hell? So
sure. And you're not like, I'm thinking, well, first I was going to say, if you're in New York, this could be easier, but then because people kind of expect that kind of thing, but then at the same time, if you were in New York, it wouldn't necessarily be easier because people would expect that kind of thing all the time and just get sick of, you know, being approached on the street for this or for that. Did you ever find, like, did you find that you got better at reading people? Like, you know, when I see somebody on the street, right, or if I see somebody in the coffee shop, there's probably an initial impression that I get of them. And then when I hear them speak, it's usually totally wrong. And, you know, I realize that I'm not good at reading people. And so I just got to not try to judge a book by its cover, but just take them as they are and get to know them over time. But did you find that you're any better at reading people or getting, you know, kind of predicting how somebody's going to act based on maybe their stance or any kind of intuitive stuff? Or is it still just everybody's unique and you never know what you're going to get?
Yeah, you know, I've honestly kind of strayed away from the street photography side of it and worked harder to get into people's lives, like meet them at their work and stuff like that. But I would say I have been able to, I am better at saying, okay, this person's in a hurry. I'm not going to annoy them. This person's more relaxed. Like, so I started going to parks where people were there to spend time rather than trying to stop someone walking down the street. Like, little things like that really helped me. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, yeah, you got your average, like, person scowling or looking angry. I would just avoid them. But, yeah. I think what was really interesting, too, for me in the interview process was allowing myself space to grow and to learn myself. Yeah. And, like, even though I personally have hard expectations on myself a lot of times, allowing myself to be like, okay, this isn't working. How do I change this? And how do I make it so that I feel more comfortable in this situation and I can still produce what I'm looking for. And so that really was interesting to allow myself to grow with the project. Because honestly, like, when I'm in another country, because when I went to Denmark to visit a friend, I was like, man, I want to take photos of people. I was so nervous. I think I took like three or four photos of people. Like, if that. I'm like in another country. I'm like, I should have got like 30. But I was so petrified. I was like, they don't know me. I don't know their culture. I don't know their language.
Yeah.
And so I just had all these excuses and insecurities. And I was like, social anxiety. And, oh, man, it was crazy. So,
well,
I still definitely...
No, go ahead.
What's that?
I was going to say that we're getting cut up here. This is awesome. I was going to say, though, that, one of the things you mentioned was being an introvert. I'm an introvert as well. I do some extroverted stuff, obviously. But a lot of guys think about themselves as being introverted, and that means that they wouldn't be necessarily good at this type of thing, like whether it's podcasting or videos or talking to strangers on the street. And I actually tell you that there's been a number of, I read a book, or I've heard some excerpts from a book on being an introvert, and it was more related to like sales and that kind of stuff. But one of the things that they pointed out was that introverts are very good actually at connecting with people because, one, we don't overpower the situation. So we don't come in thinking like we're going to just dominate the conversation, and I don't have this sort of salesy kind of aspect to my personality. And a lot of times it's our shyness and our reservedness that we would say, if maybe it's not shyness, but just being more reserved, actually communicates a sort of a sense of safety to people who we're talking to. And I just really say this for the guys that are listening to this that are introverted and they're thinking, well, that means I'm not a people person. No, that's not what that means. It actually just means that you connect to people in limited amounts and in different ways, but that actually you can actually be a very good people person because you don't necessarily come at things with this sort of extroverted, lots of energy, trying to push people into acting a certain way or have expectations for how the conversation is going to go. Introverts are usually okay with just hanging out and being quiet, right? And that's actually very powerful, especially when you're trying to get in touch with, when you're trying to hear people's story and you just need to sit back and listen.
Yeah, and introverts seem to be more naturally inclined to observe in their quietness.
Yep.
And so you're able to see, like this person is engaging in this way. And that allows you just to go with that rather than just being an overbearing individual. I think there's a lot of my introverted friends are deep thinkers and deep observers of others. And so it's a different skill set. That's just really all it is. And just learning how to utilize it.
I'm just taking a look at your website while you're talking to me. I am paying attention, but I'm also I think you're the first guy that I've interviewed that has such a strong photography area of expertise, and the pictures are really, really good. I'm not,
thank you.
I have a camera and I take pictures of rings most of the time. So, for Rustic in Maine, we take pictures of rings, and the camera does most of the work. I'll just be honest with you. I sent my son out to take some pictures. He's got a good eye for things. And I sent him out to take some pictures of some rings. And, he does just a fantastic job as well. But your pictures are really, really good. And how is this, just getting out there, doing the work, how has that helped you become a better photographer?
Oh, my gosh. It's like going to the gym and putting your reps in, like your muscles don't grow unless you use them.
Yeah.
To be honest, I don't like probably any of the photos I posted. I might like 10. Mm-hmm. I'm hypercritical of myself. And every time I go through an interaction, I'm self-evaluating, asking myself how I can have them posture different, what can I do with the lighting different, all this stuff. Just being self-critical is great. But a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, someone who I took a portrait of for my project connected me to a photographer who's been in the industry for 40 years and all that. And he saw my project. And so essentially, he's not declared my mentor, but I definitely pull from the sky.
Sure.
And just the fact that I put in the work and showed that I was sticking with something and trying to grow my skill opened the door for me to communicate with this guy. And this dude, he's taken portraits of, like Stephen Hawking, and been hired by Harvard to do books and all sorts of awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm just like holding the lights for this guy and learning 1,000 things that the internet could never have taught me.
Yep.
It's just so great. And so even just realizing that, like me doing my due diligence and working on just my project opened the doors for me to learn a skill that I would have never trained.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love learning and I love growing in it. And so it's done exactly what I wanted, as a project would make me a better person. So.
And I think that's one of the really cool things about this, and I hear this from time to time from guys who just pursue whatever is on their heart, right? They feel like they're being called to something. They don't overthink it. They just kind of go for it. And here's the thing. You don't know where it's going to take you, but when you have a passion about something, that usually leads you into some talent about that thing. And that talent usually showcases itself in some kind of way and makes connections for you. And it does take you, and I don't want to sound like all hippie here, like the universe is just taking you in the direction and you're being called to something better. I don't really know how all that works, but I do know that when guys aren't afraid to stand out on something and just showcase, some of their talent, it does open up doors and it makes connections that you wouldn't have never had made before if you just stayed still, stayed in your comfortable world. So
absolutely,
another great example for guys there to get out, man, just get out and do it. A lot of times people will call.
Also,
go ahead.
I mean, not only getting out there and doing it, but I think also there's a huge importance in embracing where it's taking you. Like, I had a guy email me. He saw my website to Google, and he emailed me. We started connecting. Found out he lived in Oakland, California. I was like, sweet, man. When I drive through, I'm going to come by and interview you, And so I went on a road trip, and I was in the area, so I swung by, hung out with this guy for 7 hours, took his portrait, connected with him, something I would have never done and never would have gone with the flow with, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But, that opportunity was created, and I pursued it a little bit, but not really that much. I just went with it, and I'm so glad I did. So glad. So yeah, going with the flow, I think, is really important, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And I think just having it's a certain type of courage. There's a certain kind of abandon that goes along with it as well. Just saying, I'm okay with wherever this takes me, right? Like, I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm okay with experiencing that. I want to experience some of life. I think, so I was looking at you took a picture of Brett McKay. So if you guys don't know his name or not familiar with his name, he's the founder of Art of Manliness. So, and Brett's word was virtus, which is Latin, was where we get the word virtues, right? And virtues actually means man or masculinity. So tell me a little bit about that connection, how that connection happened, and any kind of thoughts on why Brett chose that particular word.
Yeah. So, anybody starting a project in masculinity, once you go on the internet, you're like, who's the main authority there? So the Art of Manliness, he's the guy. And so I was like, man, that'd be so cool if I could get him to interview. And I was like, how far away is he? Because I was in Kansas City at that point. Yeah. And I saw that his organization was in Tulsa. And I was like, oh, that's not that far. All right. I just got to get a hold of him somehow. So I'm looking all through his website, and there's no way to get a hold of him through his website, right? No email, no phone, nothing. I was like, what the heck? And then in this little spot, there's if you want to contact us, you can send us a letter at blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, there it is. So I wrote him a letter and was like, hey, I'm a photographer starting this project. If you got a moment, I'd love to interview you. This is how it works, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And 3-4 months later, I get a reply that he was open to it. I was like, no way. So we plan a day, and it's the winter. And so I drive down. It's 4-hour drive, I think it was. I get to the place where we're supposed to meet. He picked this park that he liked or whatever. And I'm there, and we're just chilling. I'm waiting for him to show up. I'm like, what is going on? it ended up that he'd forgotten completely about the interview, right? And so fortunately, I had texted him or something, and he was like, "Oh no!" He's like, "I feel so bad. I'm on my way right now." So it was just really funny because, like, I drove. He didn't even know I drove so far.
Sure.
But I showed up and like waited hours, and he never showed up. And then finally, I texted him, and then like 30 minutes later, he was there. It was so funny. But I was like so insecure. I was like, "Dude, did he forget? Like, do I text him? Is he annoyed? Like, what did I do?"
Right,
like
yeah.
all of those things.
Sure.
And so anyway, he showed up. We had a great time. It was just a good connection with someone who's passionate about the same subject. And honestly, it was so long ago. I can't really remember the fullness of it. I just remember being like, man, like, finally get to meet this guy. I love the fact that, like, pursuing my passion opened this door.
Yeah.
All of that. And so over the years, I've been able to just kind of bounce an idea off him here or there. I've just really appreciated that connection. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it is cool to have the old school kind of way of the snail mail way of connecting with guys, because I can only imagine, right? I'm an easy guy to get in touch with. I'm not operating at Brett's level, so I can only imagine kind of, the mail that he would get otherwise, right? Email and stuff like that. So it's good. Good way to do it.
Be insane.
Yep. Yeah. So, this one question that I asked to guys who are doing something, positive, making some kind of positive impact in the world, and it's this, and that is, how is this affecting you as a man? So you began this journey because you wanted to know more about what it means to be a man, and how is this process, just going through this, affecting you as a man? Is it making an impact on you because of what you started?
Oh man, 1,000%. I started out my journey asking what it means to be a man. And now, even though that's something I want to help define and help be a resource, my focus is no longer on that, but it's on who should I become. And what I'm learning is that a man is a person of vision, right? And so as I become consumed with my own vision for my life, all of my insecurities and all of my motivations to get affirmation and acceptance from people is falling to the wayside because I see this thing in front of me, and I'm consumed by it. And so it's been really fascinating for me because I'm just like, the very thing that I began to seek has led me to seeking my identity. And I'm so grateful for that process because I don't know where I would be.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't. And I hated my life like 2-3 years ago. I was an electrician, was miserable, just hated it. And this project was my lifeline. And so it's led me on a journey of just growth and asking questions and meeting people and putting me in situations that has provoked me to realize more about myself.
Right.
And I've just absolutely grown as an individual because of it. Like, it's really empowering.
Man, that's awesome. Very awesome. So I was thinking about what I would answer. What would be my one word? This is tough. It is. Even though I think about this all the time, what does it mean to be a man? I think about it more like in larger context. I never try to boil it down to one word, and this was a challenge. Am I allowed to answer it, even though you're not taking a picture of me? Is that okay? I
would love that. Yeah,
right.
Let's hear it.
I was kind of going through. There's so many things. I don't really know if I could pick one word, but if I was asked to nail it down to one word, I would have to say honorable would be the word for me. And I think that I think about it more as being worthy of honor, and I don't mean that in a kind of a prideful way, but it's you kind of early on in this conversation, you said that when you would ask people what it means to be a man, they would think back to their fathers or their grandfathers, right? And there's a certain sense of, there's an honor there, right? To be thought of as like, that's a man. And I strive to be that. I want to be that. I want to be the guy that other men, that my family especially, the people who know me the closest, says there's an honorable man, and he's worthy of some kind of respect and honor. And like I said, not from a prideful kind of way. I want to live up to the expectations of what it means to be a man. And so I think that's where I would, that's the one I would land on.
I love it. So the question is, though, I always find personally interesting, who is the person when you're saying that statement that you think of most?
That's a tough one. The first person that came to mind was my grandfather on my mom's side. He's still around, and mainly because he taught me so many lessons about being a man at a very young age. You know, my dad was an alcoholic, died last year actually, at the age of 63 or so. And my grandfather, you know, still kicking, still doing okay, up in his 80s now. But my grandfather really took me in as his son, essentially, and raised me in many ways and taught me so many lessons. I grew up in the country, kind of old school lessons and things like that. And, you know, there's a lot of honorable aspects of his character that I want to emulate. Certainly not a perfect guy. You know, none of us are perfect, but that would be someone that, you know, I certainly honor him whenever I have the chance to talk about who made the biggest impact on me as being a man. I would also have to say, I mean, and this isn't, it's not trite to say this. I'm a Christian, so I run in Christian circles. And anytime somebody asks a question like this, it's like, oh, it's Jesus. That's the answer. And so it kind of gets like, yeah, everybody says Jesus, you know, that's, you know, that's good. But I would honestly say, as far as the epitome of manhood in my mind would be Christ. And I think just, living the life he lived, you know, taking if there's a way to sort of separate his deity out of it, and you just look at his humanity, his life here on the earth, as a man, just, you know, how did he respond as a man in every situation that he's presented with, that we're told about, and it was absolutely the right response. There's no better way to live, and not only that, but then to be so honorable that you make such a tremendous impact on the rest of the world. You know, for centuries, right? So he would obviously be my top, but as far as people that I've known personally, you know, my grandfather would be on the top of that list.
Yeah, makes sense. That's cool.
Well, my friend, this has been a good conversation. I'm really glad that you pitched this to me. You said, hey, Mike, let me on your podcast. And I was like, okay, what are we going to talk about? And you gave me some ideas, and I was like, that's actually really good. So this was a good conversation, and I know the guys are going to get a lot from this. Guys, if you're listening, head over to themaneffect.com and check out Timothy's work, and then you'll find ways to connect with him on the social media platforms as well. If you guys want to see the show notes from this episode, just head over to wolfandiron.com / Timothy Wenger. We'll make it that. Or you can just go to wolfandiron.com / the Man Effect. We'll link both of those things, and they'll take you to the show notes for this episode. Well, my friend, this has been a great conversation, like I said, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with down the road and just staying in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, there you have it, men. I'd love to know what you thought about the episode. Feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media networks. And look, if you got something out of this, make sure another guy does too. Share the episode and make sure it gets in front of the guys that need to hear it the most. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.